Okay.
In Australia, and wish them much love.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Colin, you can read number 8, okay? Okay, we'll start with Barbara.
No, I think I am doing the Barbara is doing number 2.
Okay.
O thou kind Lord, O thou who art generous and merciful, we are the servants of thy threshold and are gathered beneath the sheltering shadow of thy divine unity. The sun of thy mercy is shining upon all, and the clouds of thy bounty shower upon all. Thy gifts encompass all. Thy loving providence sustains all. Thy protection overshadows all. And the glance of thy favor are cast upon all. O Lord, grant thine infinite bestowals, and let the light of thy guidance shine. Illumine the eyes, gladden the hearts with the abiding joy. Confer a new spirit upon all people, and bestow upon them eternal life. Unlock the gates of true understanding, and let the light of faith shine resplendent. Gather all people beneath the shadow of thy bounty, and cause them to unite in harmony, so that they may become as rays of one sun, as waves of one ocean, and as the fruit of one tree. May they drink from the same fountain. May they be refreshed by the same breeze. May they receive illumination from the same source of light. Thou art the giver, the merciful, the omnipotent. Abdul Baha.
Behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. As the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountain of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. May God be gracious to us and bless us, and make his face to shine upon us, that they may be known upon earth, thy saving power among all nations. Let the peoples praise thee, O God. Let all the peoples praise thee. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy. For thou dost judge the peoples with equity and guide the nations upon earth. Let the peoples praise thee, O God. Let all the peoples praise thee.
Rani.
You have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and their remembrances that thy brother hath ought against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to the brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Ye Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hath thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect.
And hold fast all together by the rope which God stretches out for you, and be not divided among yourselves. And remember with gratitude God's favor on you. For ye were enemies, and he joined your hearts in love, so that by his grace ye become brethren. And ye were on the brink of the pit of fire, and he saved you from it. Thus doth God make his signs clear to you, that ye may be guided. Let there arise out of you a band of people inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right, and forbidding what is wrong. They are the ones to attain felicity. Be not like those who are divided among themselves and fall into disputations after receiving clear signs. Holy Quran. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous of you. And God has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things. Holy Quran.
Mankind was one single nation, and God sent messengers with glad tidings and warnings. And with them he sent the book in truth, to judge between people in matters wherein they differed. But the people of the book, after the clear signs came to them, did not differ among themselves, except through selfish contumacy. God, by his grace, guided the believers to the truth concerning that wherein they differed. For God guides whom he will to a path that is straight. Be united, speak in harmony, let your minds apprehend alike. Common be your prayer, common be the end of your assembly, common be your resolution, common be your deliberations, alike be your feelings, unified be your hearts, common be your intentions, perfect be your unity.
It is incumbent upon every man in this day to hold fast unto whatsoever will promote the interests and exalt the station of all nations and just governments, Through each and every one of the verses which the pen of the Most High hath revealed, the doors of love and unity have been unlocked and flung open to the face of men. We have erewhile declared, and our word is the truth, consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. Whatsoever hath led the children of men to shun one another, and hath caused dissensions and divisions amongst them, hath through the revelation of these words been nullified and abolished. From the heaven of God's will, and for the purpose of ennobling the world of being, and of elevating the minds and souls of men, hath been sent down that which is the most effective instrument for the education of the whole human race. The highest essence and the most perfect expression of whatsoever the peoples of old have either said or written hath through this most potent revelation been sent down from the heaven of the will of the all-possessing, the ever-abiding God. Of old it hath been revealed. Love of one's country is an element of the faith of God. The tongue of grandeur hath, however, in the day of his manifestation proclaimed, it is not his to boast who loveth his country, but it is he who loveth the world.
The purpose of the one true God, exalted be his glory, in revealing himself unto men, is to lay bare those gems that lie hidden within the mine of their true and inmost selves, that the diverse communions of the earth and the manifold systems of religious belief should never be allowed to foster the feelings of animosity among men, is, in this day, of the essence of the faith of God and his religion. These principles and laws, these firmly established and mighty systems, have proceeded from one source and are the rays of light. That they differ from one another is to be attributed to the varying requirements of the ages in which they were promulgated. The utterance of God is a lamp whose light is these words. Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. Deal ye one with another with the utmost love and harmony, with a friendliness and fellowship. He who is the day star of truth beareth me witness. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. The one true God, he who knoweth all things, himself testifieth to the truth of these words.
O children of men, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust? That no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder at all times in your hearts how ye were created. Since we have created you all from one same substance, it is incumbent on you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land, that from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and the essence of detachment may be made manifest. Such is my counsel to you, O concourse of light. Heed ye this counsel, that ye may obtain the fruit of holiness from the tree of wondrous glory.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at the table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, O thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all. Thou shelter all. Conferest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all dost submerge in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father, God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Abdul Baha.
Thank you all. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Now we have Tracy De Geer is going to talk to us about the Uluru Statement. And Tracy is one of the friends who had been accompanying in this program from the very beginning. I met her at the Baha'i Temple when I was guiding a few months ago. And she has, can you see the screen? She has spent nearly 50 years of researching multi-faith ways of being and learning, as well contributing to creating more sustainable living for all on our planet. After 40 years of using herbs, including 20 years in various clinics, she wrote a book called Sustainable Wellbeing. She has a degree in Bachelor of Health Science. She has been involved with the Women's Reconciliation Network for 25 years, helping to break the silencing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander experience. She is a mother of 5 children and 5 grandchildren. Yes. And yes, she is for unity, peace in the world, and she is very passionate about the plight of and justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here and in the world. So I invite Tracy to give her talk.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm going to try and share my screen. Just going to come back, Ian Davis saying the Uluru Statement in back in 2017. Land or Mother Nature, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom, remained attached thereto, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That peoples possessed a land for 60 millennia, and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years? With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionally, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are alienated from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. And our youths languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. So that's the, the statement that came out of a long process to bring together consensus of Aboriginal leaders around the whole country for a national approach to reform. So the statement is a vision statement of what repair could look like. It has been written as an invitation to the Australian people to bring Australians together to recognise Indigenous people in the Constitution. It points to Australia's conscience and psyche. It's also the latest step in a determined diplomatic resolution of the injustices borne by First Nations people, by First Nations people. The whole Uluru Statement's approach has the greatest consensus within Aboriginal politics. It is a living, history-creating document. In all laws, be it First Nations law or Crown law, the way Britain took over Australia was illegal. Without First Nations knowledge or agreement, Cook claimed the whole east coast of Australia for England. As many Aboriginal nations said, well, we were looking at Cook as he was going up the east coast. There's only been one-sided discussion of the experience of Cook coming to Australia. The taking of our land without consent represents our most fundamental grievance against the British Crown. We don't have access to our own land. We can't access special places for women's and men's business. Without our spirituality and identity, we are nothing. There needs to be a mechanism to allow these things to take place. We don't have access to our own sea as well. So those last two are quotes from the Perth Regional Dialogues. So before the everyone came together in Uluru, there was a number of regional dialogues, and they were seeking to find out how Aboriginal people would like to be included in the Constitution. But I'll get to that, more of that in a minute. After the initial invasion in Sydney came the time of the frontier wars, when massacres, disease and poison decimated First Nations, even as they fought a guerrilla war of resistance. First Nations regathered themselves. We remember the early heroes of our movement, such as William Cooper, Fred Maynard, Margaret Tucker, Pearl Gibbs, Jack Patton and Doug Nicholls, who organised to deal with the new realities. The annual Day of Mourning was declared on the 26th of January, 1938. It reflected on the pain and injustice of colonisation and the necessity of continued resistance in defence of First Nations. There is much to mourn: the loss of land, the loss of culture and language, the loss of leaders who led our struggle in generations past, as well as the loss of life, so many things. In a hostile Australia, with discrimination and persecution, out of their mourning, they started a movement, the modern movement for rights, equality, and self-determination. So there has been a number of steps up to the Uluru Statement. Aboriginal people have been having a long campaign from William Cooper in 1937, gathering signatures for petition to King George and for allowing Aboriginal representation in the federal parliament. So back then, that was the approach, and it kept on from there, the Day of Mourning, and then the 1958, there was the Federal Council for Aboriginal Advancement. They started a 10-year campaign to change the Constitution. So Aboriginal people's attention has been on this Constitution for a long time. So they gained the vote in 1962, and various bark petitions have been sent to Parliament. Charlie Perkins led the Freedom Rides to really show the nation how much discrimination was being done to Aboriginal people. Then in 1967, more than 90% of Australians voted yes in a referendum. to allow the federal government to make laws for Aboriginal people and to include them in the national census. Before that time, and in the original Australian Constitution, Aboriginal people were not counted. They were considered that they were not going to survive into the next century. How wrong those founding fathers of Australia were. They really did not believe that Aboriginal people or Aboriginal culture or Aboriginal language would be able to continue. In 1972, the Tent Embassy was set up to protest against the Liberal Party's policy on land rights. And then the petition was sent to Queen Elizabeth. Then when we go through the start of ATSIC, we have the report of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. The only recommendation, so that 1991, there was a Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. We're still having Aboriginal deaths in custody. It's actually increased. The only recommendation adopted by the government was a formal process of reconciliation, but that's been on a very bumpy road. In 1992, the High Court's Mabo decision rejected terra nullius and recognised the existence of native title. In 1995, the ATSIC commissioned a report, and ATSIC commissioned a report, and constitutional reform was a priority. Prime Minister John Howard put to the Australian people in 1999 a preamble to the Constitution that included recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples without consulting them, and hence it was rejected because they do not want symbolic thing. It doesn't give any power or no obligation on the government to listen to Aboriginal people or to have truth-telling or to have a proper treaty. And in 2000, I don't know if any of you marched across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It was 250,000 people marched across the Sydney Harbour Bridge to support the roadmap for reconciliation. But the Prime Minister at that time refused to sign, even though so many people walked across the bridge supporting it. So in 2005, he abolished ATSIC because there was some corruption investigations. Instead of allowing it to be reformed, the federal government just abolished it. Then Howard said that he would hold a referendum again, but then he lost the election. And then we had Kevin Rudd as the Prime Minister, said sorry to the stolen generations. So then once again, we start on the road to having a referendum about constitutional acknowledgement of Indigenous people. And there was various expert panels and joint select committees. Then in 2015, 40 Indigenous leaders met with the Prime Minister and opposition leader at Kirribilli House to request a new process to actually consult Indigenous communities because they did not want to have symbolism, and minimalist reform would not be acceptable. So then in 2015, another referendum council was established, and this time from the process that led to the Uluru Statement was set in place, asking Aboriginal people how they would like to be recognised within the Constitution. Unfortunately, Malcolm Turnbull did not really received the report very well, but a joint select committee, parliamentary committee, actually said that the Uluru Statement and the voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution was the only option. So in 2020, Minister Wyatt announced the establishment of a Voice Design Committee, which at the moment is still seeking submissions from the Australian public about how we think Aboriginal people, how the voice, their co-design process, what we think of it, and how we would like to see that voice enacted. So, you know, a number of people who support the Uluru Statement are trying to get people to make submissions to support that the voice has to be enshrined in the Constitution for it to be what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people ask for. Now, in the middle of this process, the United Nations has been making sort of laws to empower Indigenous people around the world. Now, Australia only endorsed that in 2009. And the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People provides that Indigenous people have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own Indigenous decision-making institutions. So this is also part of what's been feeding into having a voice, because Professor Megan Davis has had more time working in the United Nations as a young intern. She was sent by her elders than any other Indigenous person in Australia. And so she sort of brought that into the whole process. And this is just, you know, the Kirribilli statement from the Aboriginal elders, that a preamble, recognition and removing Section 25 and moderating the race powers does not go far enough and would not be acceptable. So the Referendum Council final report, which the Uluru Statement is what was given to the people of Australia, and the final report, this was what was given to the government. And there was 10 guiding principles to try and get the government engaged by a law, Indigenous law guidance. So that if there was recognition in the Constitution that it does not diminish Aboriginal sovereignty and Torres Strait Islander sovereignty. It involves substantive structural reform. It advances self-determination and the standards established under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. It recognises the status and rights of First Nations. It tells the truth of history. And it's not just to sort of give blame and to create guilt, but that this is, Australia has a 60,000-year history. It didn't start 250 years ago, and that Cook did not discover Australia. It was already occupied, and that the whole truth and the whole history is what is Australia's history, not just sort of cherry picking things that make us look good. It does not foreclose on future advancement, does not waste the opportunity of reform, provides a mechanism for First Nations agreement making, and has the support of First Nations, and does not interfere with the current and future legal arrangements. So this is just sort of some websites which I've accessed, but also is a wealth of information if you want more detail. And Dean Parkin actually reads through the statement and highlights things, because he was at all the dialogues and he's been out trying to share it with the Australian people, which it was given to. But, you know, it's a very generous statement. It's, you know, we have been given an invitation to walk with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for a better future for everybody. Is one of the differences of First Nations culture and sort of the dominant Western culture is that it's not of, okay, we win now and everyone else doesn't, you know, has to go. It's this land has brought us to be here together, and we have to find a way to actually live together harmoniously. So it's a very, very beautiful statement. But anyway, does anyone have any thoughts or, you know, any thoughts about that?
Maybe I know, I mean, there have been so many efforts taken by various groups at various times. Now, as an individual, as a collective group, what can we do to go forward?
I think the first step is to accept the invitation, you know, and to recognize that generousness for what it is. It's an incredibly gracious offer to for friendship, for walking together, and make a submission to the voice co-design process. If you go to, if you just Google, or you go to one of those, the Uluru Statement from the Heart, you know, they can help you to go through the submission to put your voice in to how we should be listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's the first step, because the treaty is going to take a long time. I've heard some elders speak that it may take 20 years for, you know, a national agreement maker. Victoria is starting to make progress. So the truth telling and listening, you know, deep listening, when someone, you know, someone from either who was taken away from their family or a community whose children were taken, we should listen to the stories, because I've heard a number of people say, every time I tell my story, I get a little bit more healed. And the more that it's actually heard, the more I can heal, because we can't overstate how much shock, how much grief, how much trauma has been endured by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and the broken promises from governments. They get blamed for so many things, which are actually the result of government policies. And it's just not fair, apart from anything else. It's, you know, Baha'i believe in justice. It's so unjust. So listening, taking the hand, walking together, and not assuming, but just doing our part. And it's powerful, you know. And then other things open up. And when we do finally get to a referendum, say yes, vote yes, and encourage everyone you know to vote yes. Barbara?
Thank you very much, Tracy. I don't want to be negative, but I fear that you're preaching to the converted tonight. And I know lots of people who don't want to hear. It's just those people complaining again. Why can't they forget the past and get on with it? You know, how do we get the average, perhaps I'm generalising towards the attitude of average Australians, but a lot of people I know have that opinion, you know, we've heard enough about them. And yet they haven't listened. And so I feel like the message isn't getting to the people who need to hear it. What do you have any strategies for making, I mean, I agree with you, those stories are so compelling and so meaningful, but how do we get them onto the television, onto commercial stations, rather than NITV and SBS and so on?
I think June wants to say something to that.
Yeah, I think it's really, as individuals, we can set an example and share the stories and challenge our communities, because we may be converted, but I don't by any means think that every Baha'i in the country is fully aware sometimes of the Indigenous history. I love the fact that on that Uluru Statement that they have it translated into so many languages. And one of the things that I've long thought is that a lot of the Baha'i writings need to be translated into Indigenous languages as well of the country. You know, I'm aware of some translations that have been done in the past, so this is a beautiful way to create dialogue, and I think that that's a fantastic thing that they've done. I know that SBS has been very behind this statement and has made, you know, great efforts to say that as a multicultural community, they're walking hand in hand with the purposes of that statement. So I think it comes down to the conversations we have with our neighbours, the conversations we have with people around us, and encouraging them if they have the opportunity to go to a library and listen to a story. I've had people say to me, where do I find these stories? They're everywhere. You can read books, you can have a friend talk to you, you can invite someone to come to your community and give a presentation. You can just, you know, young people who are affected by this, third or fourth generation of stolen children. It's very, very moving to talk to people in their 30s and the impact that this has had on their families intergenerationally, and very powerful and very moving to look at. They are starting that healing process, and there's some amazing people doing fantastic things in their community. So I think also, as well as elders, it's reaching out to people in their 30s who have actually, you know, been able generationally, they're starting that healing process. So just, you know, like as the statement says, to be there in friendship, and that means you're there for the good stuff and the difficult stuff as well. So yeah, but I think as a writer, I think stories, poetry, storytelling, these sorts of things move the heart, and giving opportunities wherever we can for that to
happen. And they're doing, there actually is starting to be more of a shift, and those non-Indigenous under 30 are definitely more open. And, you know, for those who are more resistant, we have to, like, you know, like Anzac Day, for example, you know, if you told people, and there was a period of time where they were sort of saying, we shouldn't be celebrating Anzac Day at all, and then another wave came and it said, oh, well, you know, you can't forget. Well, why should Aboriginal people have to be told to forget everything all the time? But and we even tell Papua New Guinea and Turkey, well, don't develop certain sites because there's Australian lives have been lost there. So to sort of make parallels, well, you know, that's racism, to say that they have to get over it, but we can celebrate things, you know, that's racism. And so, you know, we just have to find the way that, well, if you experience that you invited someone to your house and slowly you were restricted in which rooms you could go into. You wouldn't like it. Well, why should Aboriginal people like it? And if you're promised, if the government wants to take your house to build a road, and you say, well, that's my home, how can you, I should be compensated if you want to take that land back to build a road. Well, why shouldn't Aboriginal people be compensated? You know, if we go there, it's just racism, that it's sort of a double standard. It's not right. So we just have to find the way without getting into, to help people's fears dissipate. Underneath all that, there's a lot of fear. And we have to sort of really emphasize there is nothing to fear here, really, because Aboriginal people, it always amazes me that because the land has brought you here, we have to accept what the land is saying. Whether we like it or not, our culture says we have to look after you, you know? So the average Australian has not heard that. They think that they're going to be treated like they've treated the refugees. So we just sort of have to find the way to help people dissipate their fear and their guilt and their shame, which are all very immobilizing emotions that people want to push away. Don't make me feel ashamed, or guilty. That sort of makes them freeze. But, Aboriginal people have been shamed. So anyway, I hope that answers something.
Can I comment? Yeah, thank you, Tracy. I don't think most people probably, or maybe I'm the only one who didn't know, had barely aware of the Uluru Statement until I read about it a few months ago. And they've said it's from the heart, and I think we have to listen with the heart, which means reading it carefully and sympathetically more than once. So I read it again this morning over a coffee and saw all the things I'd missed the first couple of times. It's really, every paragraph is beautifully constructed. It's not just a legal document, it's poetry in a way, some of it. And a really good place to start learning about what the issues are. You talked about the fear which Australians have, and the concept of sovereignty we think of, well, it's either ours or theirs, and if it's theirs, they're going to take our house or something like that. So I read the history of it in this book by Henry Reynolds, really very readable, and he makes it clear that it's not about, it's about sharing. I mean, the law was, which could have been implemented right from the beginning, was about pastoral leases, which is a way of sharing the land, the same way as we share a footpath quite easily.
Yes. David.
Yeah, just on, June made the comment before about the younger, the younger people 30 years and under have a different attitude. As a school teacher, you see it in the schoolyard. I remember giving a talk recently in the last year and a half on a scientific proof of the oneness of humanity. And Perry, I'm quite happy to share it in this forum at some point. But and there was a young girl, not a Baha'i. She was very, very new to her journey in the faith. She now is a Baha'i, and so are both her parents. But at this point, this was the first fireside they had attended. And at the end of it, because I discussed where racism may actually originate, and she said, we don't have racism in our school. We don't have racism in the schoolyard. And it was quite interesting because it opened my eyes a little bit to having a look around the schoolyard as a teacher and noticing, because I work at the larger school in the Southern Hemisphere. So we have 3,800 children. It's as big as, you know, a city in Australia. And you're a large town. We have a very, very large spectrum of representation of Australia. And looking at the tables at which kids sit to eat their lunches, there is complete mixing, and there isn't any mention of race anywhere. And I brought it up in the classroom one time, and a young girl from, she's from the Sudan. Her skin is so dark that, you know, she looks like she's ebon all the way through. Like she's just one of these people who is just midnight when you look at her. And she's absolutely beautiful young lady. But she said, yes, in school, there is nothing. But in shops, when you walk in, you feel a reaction from the shopkeeper almost immediately. And I thought that's, you know, it's quite interesting that the younger generation, they are willing to accept, you know, the oneness of humanity for what it is, as a matter of course. No need for proofs, no need for spiritual guidance in the matter. It's the people that have been set in stone and carved already from the block that they've been made from, that need to be molded. And unfortunately, that stone is quite brittle. So yeah, I think that's an interesting, you know, I think the future is bright in this regard.
And yeah, just your point, that's very true. And your point, Colin, that about sovereignty, you know, that the sense of that they can be, Aboriginal sovereignty can never be ceded because it's so deeply embedded. It's so natural. It's so, you know, the obligations. I mean, the culture is one of reciprocity, you know, so that will always be in Australia because we've had all those thousands of years of input into the land and the water. It's here. Even we live here, we're influenced by that energy, whether we know it or not. Our love of barbecues, our swimming. The English never swam. Where did they learn to swim? From our Aboriginal people. So much of Australian culture is actually Aboriginal, but they never got any credit. So, you know, the sovereignty is actually on impacting all of us that live here in this country, but we're not giving it conscious attention. So if we gave it a bit more attention, it'd be amazing what Australia could actually do. Anyway, that's what I think.
There was a good observation in the statement about how they're losing their children and losing all the elements of happiness and civilization. And but it's not that they're any less, it's just that that's what's happened to them. And if you think about what a civilization is supposed to be, it's not just buildings, it's feeling secure and operating in a kind of a legal system and the relationships between people, and that's what makes people happy and gives purpose. And I mean, I wasn't there, but I think they had that until it was taken away from them.
I just wanted to say that I was very excited about the National Indigenous Languages projects that have been going on, and the fact that they're opening it up for everybody to have the opportunity to learn Indigenous languages at school. It won't just be the Indigenous kids at all, it'll be everybody, which is similar to what they've done in New Zealand. And I just think that that's very exciting. And I recently, because I'm from Papua New Guinean background for people that don't know me, and Australian, and I learnt a little bit of language from my mum, and I got up and read a poem that my cousin had translated, but in my mother's village language. And I can say that that was a very powerful experience for me as a second generation migrant to be able to do that. And I think that is a very beautiful part of the healing process. So if any of us have the opportunity to go to a class, and you know, we're talking about sitting alongside. And some people might say, you know, like, Papua New Guinea's got several hundred languages, what's the point? Why would you hold on to a village language? There's lots of languages, why would we do that? But there's this beautiful musicality and this culture embedded in language. And even if it's just a handful of words, even if it's enough for a few phrases of welcome and thank you, like if I'm doing, you know, I should have really said that I'm on Turrbal and what is it, Darabal land? Like people are being very specific when they do welcome to countries about where they are, which people they're saying thank you to of that group. And I think those things are things that we can take on board, that they're very powerful things to be able to do. So yeah.
I'll just share one story about, she's actually was a university lecturer, and anyway, she ended up going back to Dubbo and learning traditional possum skin. You know, you do a carving and you do someone's life story, or, you know, a number of things. So she and her sister were doing that. And she showed some of the elders that that was happening. And also when she learnt some language, and some of the elders, they just cried. They cried. They never, ever, they just thought, we'll never be able to practice our culture again. We'll never be able to speak our language again. And the fact that that possum skin carving was able to be done again. You know, there was a prophecy said by some of the elders that, okay, yes, we've been disrupted, but the children of the colonizers will come and sit by our campfire and want to learn. And that is happening, because there's a deeper spirituality within Australian culture, comes from Aboriginal spirituality coming up, you know. But the elders cried to see that what, you know, because they weren't allowed to wear possum skins anymore. They were only were allowed to use blankets, which of course were much colder. That's why they became more susceptible to the flu and the smallpox, because they weren't allowed to do what they had been doing. And they were afraid of speaking their language, so that, oh, you know, don't speak at home, don't speak the language at home, because if you did, the children would be taken away to only learn English and taken to another part of the country so they wouldn't feel that connection to country. But people who were taken to another part would go through Australia and suddenly feel, oh, I belong here. And then they would discover consciously why. They would find their history, you know, and someone would come up and say, you're my sister's daughter, or something like that, you know. There's all these things would happen. So the disruption of, and, you know, like some of the kids that end up in detention are there because they become disruptive in school, because they're told, well, Cook discovered Australia. They're like, well, that's not true. Why should I listen to anything else? So there's reasons. And it's so ironic that the most law-abiding, they had a very strict law in between Aboriginal tribes. It was very strict. Who could marry who could do what? And that now they're considered so lawless. It's only because of certain things being imposed upon them to try and make them fit. If you don't fit into this box, you're breaking the law. But it's a very superficial law. You know, it's just made so that we protect property more than people. But languages are very important. Reclaiming language does bring back the culture, and it heals the many things. Is there anybody else? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's all right. Yeah, there was an interesting case. You talk about the blankets versus the animal skin ways of warming. There was a case up in the Northern Territory where a group of people were, some youths were going into shops and saying, "Pay us money or we'll put a curse on your shop." And then of course, they wouldn't pay the money. What's a curse going to do? So they wouldn't pay the money. And of course, they would let it be known that they'd put a curse on the shop. And so their local people weren't coming into the shops because the shop's cursed. And so in effect, it was working because people wouldn't go into the shop because the shop had been cursed, thus cursing the shop. And so the shopkeepers went to the police and said, "Hey, these guys have, they're running a racket here. They're running a protection racket." And the police said, "What have they've cursed you. What are we supposed to do about that? They haven't broken any actual laws. There's no law in Australia against putting a curse on someone. What are we supposed to do about it?" And they realized that this is a really difficult cultural problem because they've done something that doesn't break the law of the governance under which they're living. But the elders were incredibly upset because they were going against the elders and doing unauthorized, throwing around unauthorized curses. So the elders wanted them punished, and obviously so did the shopkeepers. And so the police went to the elders and said, "Look, they haven't broken our laws, but they have broken yours." And they said, "But if we punish them, we're breaking your laws." And they said, "Okay, we're just going to all turn around. You can do what you want." And they took him out into the desert with some elders and gave him a good, lesson, telling off, and came back and said, "Find your own ways back." But the upshot of the story is it is so difficult when you have two cultures with completely different legal systems and ways of doing things to try and work together, because even the punishment system in that would have broken a law, in a different way. So it's a very, very difficult thing for people to be able to, work together. And because when you think about it, how is it, in our culture, we don't believe in curses. How have they done anything wrong? And yet obviously they clearly had, because it was working.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Now, is there anyone else? Parimal, Sachi, Beta.
Can I say something else? I already spoke.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, Barbara made a good comment about there's a lot of people out there who aren't interested, or even it's a big job. I mean, it took 200 years just to recognise that Aborigines were here. I mean, it was kind of obvious, but the law took that long to recognise it. So it's incredible.
You're muted.
You just muted yourself, Colin.
Okay, sorry, I buttons everywhere. Yes, the statement's really calling for a transformation in Australia, to become compassionate and to learn how to consult, and that's a big thing. But we've got to start somewhere, so we might as well start with us. And for me, the little incidents I remember most fondly throughout my life has been my interactions with Aboriginal people. And I have to thank my parents, because when we lived in Griffith, we were not far from Three Ways Reserve. I didn't know it then, but Stan Grant was a teenager there at the time. But Mum and Dad made really good friends amongst the people there. They'd come round and Mum would play the piano, and the ladies would sing the pop songs of the 40s. And just having a few of these I mean, it means we have to get out of our comfort zone and make some opportunities, maybe visit some people and talk and listen and be the first person to say hello. But these are the sort of memories we'll treasure, I think.
Anyone else? Maybe I can ask a question. You know, there are many other countries where Indigenous people have been not given the due rights and things like that. Has any other countries have done so well that we can try to emulate them?
Well, New Zealand's done better than us, and Canada's trying to make a treaty now and that they will actually follow.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Siva, because I think also that sense that First Nations people across the world can also collaborate as well, because, you know, sometimes even though you might be in another country, we all have a connection back to where our parents are from. So even though I'm in Australia, I have a connection to the Papua New Guinean people, Pacific people, like there's large Tongan communities in Australia. There's also the South Sea Islander community of the people who were basically, you know, stolen from Vanuatu and Papua New Guinea and different places and put in the cane fields. And I think that that's a history that's growingly acknowledged in Australia. So I think that a lot of these groups are also coming together too to see their shared experience. And I know one of the things in New Zealand was they had things of working with the elders to look at law and look at how can we accommodate different cultures within law and have discussions. I was struck by, we were visiting many years ago, Te Piheri Hetaraka, and he had such a good relationship with the council. He was doing designs for inside, and they would come and talk to him and sit, you know, at having a coffee with him. And I thought, I had never seen that in Australia, that level of like ease between the council and, you know, obviously a local artisan. And I think we have to get to that level. We have to get to that level of being so comfortable to have awkward situations to avoid things being perpetuated. And I you know, and I've met Colin's mum. She's a beautiful lady, and I know there are certain people that I meet and I can feel they have no prejudice at all, and I feel immediately comfortable around them, immediately. And I think if we can emulate that in the way that we move in our social circles and who we talk to and who we welcome in, and our moving out of what might be comfort zones for us, that we make that effort, that's really an important thing to do. But yeah. Oh, sorry, Dave.
Yeah, just on the interesting meeting with Te Warihi Hitaraka, the council that met with him, he was an auxiliary board member at the time, they met with him because they wanted to make one of the streets in the town a one-way street. And they needed approval from the local elders of the Maori tribe to do that. And so it's quite, which, you know, is so far beyond what what we're doing in Australia. It's more we're doing this, deal with it. But on another thing, on the swimming that you mentioned, Tracy, the Australian crawl, which is known around the world as freestyle, but was originally the Australian crawl, actually came through the Vanuatuans and New Caledonians who came to Australia to cut cane, brought over as slaves, and they swam like that. And the Australians were, what the hell is this? This is incredible. You guys swim so much faster than us. So then we developed it, and that's when people of the rest of the world took notice. So yeah, it wasn't even, it was Indigenous people, but of the South Pacific that had invented that particular swim.
Wow. There's a lot of knowledge with the Indigenous people in various aspects, whether it is medicine or caring the nature or whatever it is. a wonderful knowledge that we simply ignore. Uh, and also their spirituality. I'm always fascinated by their spirituality and spiritual capacity. I remember reading the is that My Place by, what's the name, the Western Australian professor who wrote, Sally Morgan. I happened to read that book, not because I read books, but my daughter was doing her HSC and this was a book that they had to read. So I read that. And then I was so fascinated by those, how they can be in touch with the nature. They communicate with the nature and the spiritual powers they had. And then that was in the book, but then I speak to friends and I have been with the friends, Aboriginal friends. Then I felt those things in first hand. They, in every aspect, they have wealth of knowledge. If only we can respect and nurture these things. As you said that we should join hands and walk together. Not to make people feel guilt or shame, but to show our nobility. They are already noble. They have been patient. Every country where people have been suppressed, they have taken arms for their rights. But these friends have been patient. So they exhibited all the virtues that we are trying to develop ourselves. Yes.
Very true.
Perimal, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say something. Actually, introducing law and order is one thing, but we must learn how to live with them. For example, when we were in Malaysia, I gave up everything from the urban living and went and lived with them. We went to the village where there is no water, no electricity, no road, and so on. And we developed the area. If when we live with them, we are part and parcel with them, then they love. And we learn their culture, we learn their language and so on. So we are most of the time, we are more inclined to living with people who are suppressed. For example, now my wife has gone to Vayala. She has gone there and living with the Aboriginal here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And she shared with me a lot of stories about these people. They are very loving, very simple, and we must live with them. And they will like us. We cannot just live in isolation. We must feel they are part and parcel of us. We are one. This is how we develop. We have been in Cambodia with the village people, and we have been to Thailand, and now she has gone to Vayala. This law is just one thing. They must accept us and we must accept them. We are just one human being. We cannot live in isolation. It's very sad to say that we will bring them and like what Tracy was telling, we cannot put them in boxes. You live here, I live here. That doesn't make sense.
Yes.
So we must feel they are part and parcel of us. And the whole thing will overcome. We must be inclined incline ourselves to the Creator. Otherwise, we will always see the difference. We are making a lot of improvement in the country which I came from, Malaysia. We have done a lot of improvement. We have brought the people out from the rural area, educate them. We provide education to the children. We show them why education is so important. But we live with them, not bring them out of their surroundings. So this is very important. We must feel they are part and parcel of us. We must feel that we all belong to the one same race. That is the human race. That feeling must be in our heart. Wherever we go, whoever we meet, we must have that in our heart. Then we'll make a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? How is AA or Mildura? We have not heard from you. We don't know. You want to say anything? Beta,
I agree with whatever you say. It is right. I think we need to learn how to get along with everyone, how to respect everyone. Doesn't matter what color we are, what culture we are, what religion we have. We are all human beings. We need to respect each other and make sure that we love each other from the bottom of our life. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much for the lovely talk.
anyone else? So now everyone will go and.
Barbara just put her hand up.
Okay.
Just very quickly, I wanted to say thank you to everyone for the comments. I feel like it's been a wonderful discussion too, that built on what Tracy did. I value everything you said, and I do look forward to comments on what I have to say in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Yes. All friends, Barbara will be talking to us on April 29th on, what is that?
On pygmies in the Congo.
Yes, pygmies in the Congo, her service to the people there.
She was in Cambodia as well, isn't it, Barbara?
Cambodia, Vietnam.
8 years in South Vietnam during the war.
Yeah.
And now 11 times in Congo.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And,
but I live in Australia, and the Indigenous people are very, very important.
Yes. And next week we have Sachi. Where is Sachi? Sachi is going to talk to us next week. Please say hello, Sachi.
He said. I had to unmute Sachi.
Okay.
Yes, I'll be talking on creation and the creator based on nature's setup.
And he will be talking to us next week.
Yeah, surely, yeah.
Yes. And anyone else who wants to make any comments?
Thank you, Tracy. It was really very informative.
Yeah. Yes, and now I think what we can do is each one of us go to accept the invitation as you said, and give our submission or suggestions or whatever it is, and be part of this to help make this happen. And the hope that was mentioned by David, and which was endorsed by Tracy, is that the younger generation, they are free from this division and racism. So we had to reach to younger generation as much as possible so that it gathers momentum to give the due rights to the indigenous people. And we are also encouraging younger people to come and talk here. And David and John's son Benjamin will be talking in May sometimes. Yes, thank you very much, Tracy, and really appreciate. And I was amazed the passion that you had for this issue from the time that we started having these meetings. I hope it will gather momentum from now onwards, at least among the friends who are here, and we will try to spread this message far and wide.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank
it's
you,
very
Tracy.
appreciated.
You're done mute, Tracy. You're muted, Tracy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Please, everyone make a submission. All your voice counts to help
Thanks.
Aboriginal people have a voice.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank
You
you.
got a lot of information now.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway,
Thank you.
see you
Barbara.
next week.
See you next week. Bye.
See you.